YN. Good morning, Dad. Good morning, Mr. Kim said, keeping the newspaper down. YN's mouth watered after seeing her favorite dishes on the dining table. YN smiled, slurping a spoon of her favorite seaweed soup. She hummed at the taste because it was so delicious. YN. Nancy, come here. Nancy, a middle aged woman, came bowing in front of YN. Yes, Miss YN, Nancy smiled. Nancy, how many times I've told you not to call me Miss YN? I don't like this formality. Just call me YN. Okay, YN, Nancy said, earning a glare from Mr. Kim. Nancy, this seaweed soup is amazing, I must tell you. Did you change your usual recipe of making this seaweed soup? I didn't make this soup. It was made by the new maid Jungkook. Nancy smiled. Really? Call her Nancy. I want to praise her cooking skills. It is awesome. Nancy nodded her head, calling for Jungkook. YN saw a middle-aged woman walking inside the dining room. She smiled, bowing in front of her. YN, your seaweed soup is amazing, Mrs. John. YN smiled, pulling her hand back after shaking her hand. YN noticed her father gesturing her to sanitize her hand. YN rolled her eyes, sanitizing her hand under the table, not wanting to break Mrs. John's heart. I know to make other kinds of soups as well, Miss YN. If you want, I can make them for you. Mrs. John smiled. Oh, that would be awesome, Mrs. John. I will wait for it. And please call me YN. I am like your daughter. YN smiled and Mrs. John nodded her head. And Somi, do you live in the maid quarters alone or you have someone living with you? And tell us about yourself, Mr. Kim asked, eating another spoon of his cereal. I live in the maid quarters with my son Jungkook. We came to Daegu from Busan and my son is outside right now. I'll call him if you want, Master 𝐃𝐄𝐿. Mrs. Jones said, taking a small button phone out of her pocket, and Mr. Kim nodded his head, saying okay. Jungkook, son, come inside the mansion, in the dining room, okay? Come fast. Mrs. Jones smiled, keeping her phone back on her pocket. YN smiled as she noticed a handsome boy of her age coming inside the mansion. The boy had bunny-like features, with big eyes, a small button nose, and full lips. He was also quite cute, with a shy demeanor. YN could tell that the boy was nervous because he didn't dare to look in the eyes of Kim's. This is my son John Jungkook, going to study in Bangtan High School from tomorrow. Mrs. Jones smiled, patting Jungkook's back. YN smiled at the mention of her high school's name. Mr. Kim frowned hearing that because that high school only gave admission to selected elite people, and even Mr. Taejung had to give many bribes to that school to get YN's admission there. How did Jungkook got admission there? Mr. Kim asked, wiping his lip with the tissue paper. Mrs. Jones smiled, looking at her son with proud eyes. Bangtan High gives scholarship to only one extremely bright student every year, and this year Jungkook got scholarship. And the principal said my son got this scholarship because of his talent and intelligence. Mrs. Jones smiled, kissing her son's forehead, making YN smile at the mother-son duo. She was kind of missing her mother at that moment. What about your husband, Mrs. Jones? YN noticed Jungkook visibly stiffening his body, and Mrs. Jones' smile changed into a frown. Mrs. Jones, I divorced him. Jungkook clenched his fist, looking away. Mr. Kim, oh, what happened? YN, Jungkook, what are your future plans? I mean, what do you want to do in your life? YN said, interrupting her dad, not wanting to make the Joon family more uncomfortable. Jungkook heard an unfamiliar voice of someone saying his name, so he looked at her. The girl had big, expressive eyes, a small button nose, and full lips. Jungkook? Jungkook blinked and looked around confused. He had been so lost in her beauty that he didn't realize that YN called his name. Jungkook? YN said again, this time with a small giggle, making Jungkook snap out of his dreamland. I wanted to become a businessman since my childhood. It is my dream to own a chain of companies one day. I want to become like Mr. Kim one day, Jungkook said, flashing his bunny smile. Mr. Kim chuckled humorlessly, making Jungkook's smile vanish. Of course, Jungkook, you will achieve your dream one day. And if you want any help, you can ask my dad. Since he is a businessman too, he can help you in this field. I'm going to be a businesswoman as well. We both will achieve our dream one day. Fighting! YN smiled, showing her fists, making Jungkook's heart melt. JK, thank you. Jungkook smiled. Mrs. Jones, we may take our leave, Mr. Kim, and thank you, YN, for your sweet words. Mrs. Jones smiled, going out with her son. Jungkook looked back at the mansion one last time, taking in the sight of YN slurping her soup with a smile. He felt his heart flutter in his chest. He had never met someone so beautiful, both inside and out. Jungkook sighed and turned away from the mansion. He walked away, his heart full of hope and fear. YN went back to slurp her favorite soup. She noticed her father glaring at her, so she kept the spoon down, looking at her father. Why did you say to that boy to get my help in business field? Mr. Kim asked, and YN rolled her eyes internally. Dad, it is called helping Jester. You won't understand. YN gave her father a fake smile, going back to eat her breakfast. You're just reducing your chances by giving chances to poor people. Mr. Kim rolled his eyes. What do you mean, Dad? YN asked with a sigh. Those poor people were born to serve elite people like us. We rich people should treat them as servants, not as business partners. Mr. Jones laughed, eating his dessert. YN didn't bother to reply her father because she thought that would be a waste of her time and energy. She knows that her father's body is filled with greed and pride. Why are you not playing with us, YN? Youngjae asked, holding his ball. You guys play, I'll just sit there and watch your match. YN smiled, pointing a bench over the side of the ground of a mansion. Okay then, cheer for me, baby. Youngjae winked at her. YN rolled her eyes playfully at her cousin. Soon the soccer match got started, and YN started to cheer for her cousin. Youngjae gave a flying kiss to YN at his every goal, and YN just laughed, thinking that her cousin is crazy. Soon YN got bored over the match. She took out her phone, watching TikTok videos of cute animals. Youngjae kicked the ball, and it got hit on someone who was watering the plants. He turned back, and it was Jungkook. Dude, pass me that ball, Youngjae said, and Jungkook glared at him, because Youngjae didn't even bother to say sorry to him. Can't you hear? Are you deaf? Youngjae started to laugh, making Jungkook more angry. YN puts her phone back on her pocket, looking at the ruckus, standing up from the bench. Leave it, dude, Youngjae's friend Bam Bam said, trying to cool down the situation. Yes, you're correct. Let's leave it because how maid's son can know how to play soccer, Youngjae said with a smirk. Suddenly, Youngjae's smirk dropped when the ball flew over his head, hitting the goal post. He saw Jungkook smirking at him. YN laughed, clapping her hands, and it went unnoticed by them because YN was standing a little far away from them. Hey, what's your name? Yugyeom asked, looking at him with an amused expression. Jungkook Jeon, Jungkook said as they both shook their hands. I'm Yugyeom, this team's captain, and Youngjae's elder brother. And this is Bam Bam, Jackson, Mark, Jinyoung, and JB are my friends. And the girl over there is YN, my cousin, Yugyeom said, pointing at YN. YN smiled at him, and Jungkook smiled back with a hammering heart. Hey, why don't you play with us today? Bam Bam asked, and all agreed to him except a jealous Youngjae. No, actually I have errands to run, and Mr. Kim would get mad if I don't water the plants. Jungkook smiled, scratching his nape. Dude, just play with us. Only for 5 minutes, Jackson said, hitting Jungkook's back playfully. And Jungkook smiled, shaking his head, saying no. Just 5 minutes, dude. I'll convince Uncle Kim. This time, Mark asked. No, dude, I need to water the plants. Jungkook smiled apologetically. I'll convince my father. You can play with them, Jungkook. YN showed her adorable smile, making Jungkook's heart melt. Jungkook nodded his head, instantly agreeing to YN, making her clap her hands in excitement. Jungkook smiled, jogging towards the main ground. Jungkook played soccer like a professional, making clear goals for his team and dodging Youngjae's pushes with ease. He won the game for his team, scoring countless goals. Yugyeom ran towards him and gave him a high five. Everyone watched Jungkook in awe, amazed by his skill and talent. Jungkook's teammates cheered and gathered around him, congratulating him on his victory. "You play like a professional," Yugyeom said, giving a fist bump to Jungkook, and Jungkook smiled at him. "I would gladly make you join our soccer team if I lived here," Yugyeom said, and Jungkook looked at him, feeling confused. "What do you mean?" Jungkook asked. "I live in Gwangju with my friends and family. We came Daegu to spend vacation with my cousin, and sadly, our vacation is ending tomorrow, and we'll go back to Gwangju," Yugyeom said with a sigh. "Oh, I get it, Yugyeom," Jungkook nodded his head. Jungkook was about to go, but he stopped when he heard a voice calling for him. He turned around and saw Wayan walking towards him with a beautiful smile. "Jungkook," Wayan said, "you played well, I'm impressed." Wayan smiled, extending her hand towards him. Jungkook was about to hold Wayan's hand, but Youngjae dragged her inside the mansion. Wayan turned her head towards Jungkook and mumbled sorry with a cute pout. Jungkook watched as Youngjae dragged her away, feeling a pang of disappointment. He had wanted to hold Wayan's hand, but Youngjae had ruined the moment.